Hello, and welcome to the Right Time for Kids virtual launch workshop, created by Teacher Created Materials. Teacher Created Materials is a family-owned company that began in the garage of a teacher 40 years ago. Our founder, Rochelle Cracchiolo, envisioned creating a company focused on one vision, to create a world in which children love to learn. All of our materials and resources are created by teachers for teachers and students with this vision in mind. My name is Kim Carlton, and I'm an academic officer with Teacher Created Materials. I'm a former high school English teacher with 16 years of experience teaching writing to students and teachers. Let's take a moment to look at our goals for this introductory webinar for the Right Time for Kids series. In this session, we will investigate the components of the Right Time for Kids kits. We're going to discover how mentor text integrate instruction in reading, language, and writing skills. And we'll trace the cohesive learning goals throughout a single lesson. These are the materials that you should have in front of you as we're beginning this webinar. Your Right Time for Kids virtual webinar note-taking guide, and that will help facilitate your learning experience. It's important to have it ready to go with notes to remind you where key information is after the training. You should also open up your Right Time for Kids bags so that you can explore the contents in depth later in this webinar. And finally, sticky notes might be helpful to guide you and flag pages that you want to remember and revisit later on. Before we dive any further, I want to direct you to that note-taking guide that accompanies this virtual workshop. Throughout the webinar, you'll occasionally be directed to stop and do something on the note-taking guide. Anytime you see this image, you'll know you'll need to complete a portion of your note-taking guide. Remember that you can pause or rewind this video at any time to take notes and process information at your own speed. Let's jump right in. Let's start by taking a moment to unpack the contents of the Right Time for Kids kit. Inside the bags, you will find 32 high-interest mentor text cards, 4 teacher's guides with 8 specific lessons for each genre: opinion and argument, informative explanatory, narrative nonfiction, and narrative fiction. Student handbooks, including full-color copies of the text for annotation and activities. A best practices guide to make teaching writing easy for teachers. We will refer to this best practices guide often throughout the webinar. You may want to tab pages for further reading and study them on a particular topic. Keep it close by for reference. You'll also see a jump drive that gives you access to the technology platform and digital versions of our resources. We're going to take some time now to go through each feature and its components. One of the first things you may notice is that there's 4 teacher's guides and a best practices guide. Why is that? Why not one teacher's guide for all the genres? Well, the reason is simple. States across the U.S. have increased students' reading and writing demands, asking that students be skilled in a variety of genres, written for a variety of purposes and audiences. Our best practices guide highlights research on teaching writing. Research in writing suggests that when teaching children, the focus should be on one genre at a time, rather than trying to address all of the traits of writing in every piece. This allows teachers and students the opportunity to dive deeply into one genre of writing. The Right Time for Kids series has 4 genres and 8 different mentor texts for each. Each lesson includes activities that develop writing, reading, language, and speaking and listening skills. The mentor text and writing assignments allow students to engage, explore, and emulate the reading and writing formats necessary to be successful with this genre. Students learn to write for a variety of purposes, audiences, and in a variety of formats. Students might produce a book review, an editorial cartoon, a researched paper, an informational poster, personal narrative, announcement, resume, or even a legend. Each lesson adds another layer of skills that can be applied to students' own future writing. Let's dig a little bit deeper into the kits and look at these mentor text cards. If you haven't already, please take them out of their plastic sleeve. Feel free to pause the webinar at this time if you need to take a look. Like the teacher's editions, the cards are divided into 4 genres: opinion argument, informative explanatory, narrative nonfiction, and narrative fiction. Notice how each sturdy card is color-coded and numbered. Right Time for Kids takes its name from the Time for Kids resource that makes up the fun and relevant topics on the mentor cards. The mentor texts offer a variety of effective writing models, like articles, reviews, editorials, and comics. The text features visuals, headers, graphs, captions, and illustrations. These mentor texts will serve as the models for students' own writing with each specific genre. When a student reads a book review, they'll practice writing a book review. When they read a legend, they'll practice writing a legend. The wide variety of text types for both reading and writing connect to state standards across the country that call for students to write in a variety of ways with awareness for audience and purpose. The organization of the mentor text cards is very deliberate. Card number 1 introduces the genre and its unique characteristics. Cards numbers 2 through 7 focus on developing the writing and language skills that are important to crafting that genre. The mentor texts show different ways that a genre can present itself. For example, the Level 3 opinion argument cards include a pro-con debate, an editorial cartoon, and a book review, all different forms of opinion and argument writing. Card number 8 is the culminating activity. In this card, students synthesize all of the knowledge and skills that they have been building in this writing to create a piece of writing that applies the skills acquired in their previous activities. We've now come to our first stop and do. Choose one of those 4 genres that you'd like to explore more. Find those 8 mentor text cards of that genre. Take a few minutes to look at all 8 cards in the set. What do you notice? What are the similarities? Where are their differences? Where do you see teachable moments for your kids? Pause the webinar here and complete the stop and do section of your note-taking guide. Return to the video when you're ready. Welcome back. Hopefully you've had the opportunity to look at the mentor text cards for one genre and get a feel for the kinds of texts, topics, and focus skills that they address. The mentor text cards are only one part of the Right Time for Kids kits, but they're a vital one. Let's investigate some of the research and rationale for why reading mentor texts are an important part of the writing process. The best thing about mentor texts is that they're time efficient. As a teacher, there was never enough time to do all the things I needed to do with my students. Using mentor text allowed me to accomplish multiple goals using the same piece of text. Plus, returning to a mentor text for different purposes meant that my students were diving deeper into the rigorous learning instead of just gliding along the comprehension surface. Mentor texts like the one in the Right Time for Kids series are designed to integrate skill development in several areas: reading, writing, and language and convention skills. We're going to take a few minutes to look at the research and rationale behind each of these. Mentor text and reading are an important part of the Right Time for Kids series. Analyzing a text using what Kelly Gallagher calls first draft and second draft reading pushes students beyond just comprehension and into examining a writer's craft. The lessons in the Right Time for Kids series are framed for multiple reads to allow students to move beyond just the recall of information and into rigorous analysis. These same skills will later be used by the students as writers. Students see how words, images, and ideas in the text work together to create meaning, and they can see how they can do it in their own writing as well. And remember, most compelling of all is the research that suggests that reading leads to better writing, and writing leads to an increased ability in reading. Close reading is an important part of the Right Time for Kids series. In fact, the 3 levels of reading are designed to help students gather information from text and are embedded in our lessons. Level 1 reading is reading on the lines, or basic comprehension. That's the initial reading of a text, finding out what it's about and what the main ideas are. Many times we stop here though as teachers, and we keep moving along to the next piece of text or the next lesson. We never give kids the time to practice deeper understanding. Like an iceberg, there's still quite a bit below the surface that we have not explored with our students. Level 2 reading is reading between the lines, or inferencing. What else is the writer implying? With this level of analysis, we look what is being said below the surface. Why did an author use a particular word? What is he suggesting about a character? This level of reading asks us to consider why the author made a choice in the writing and what meaning is resting just below the surface. In addition to helping with a deeper level of comprehension, it also enforces the idea that writers make purposeful choices to convey meaning. And for an emerging writer, that emphasizes the power of decision-making they have in their own writing. Finally, level 3 is beyond the lines, or application. It's the third and deepest level of reading, asking students to carry their reading beyond the text itself and look and see how it applies to other context. Using mentor text as models for students' own writing takes students out of just the text itself and into the specific techniques that an author used that they could try on their own. Did the author use italics for emphasis? Did the author divide the information using headers? Imagine a student noticing how an author uses a transition to connect ideas. When they see it in reading, they can then apply it in their own writing. This third level of reading moves beyond the lines and asks students to apply techniques to convey their own messages. The lessons promote this close reading approach, and when you look at the lesson plans, you'll notice that the students read the text multiple times with multiple purposes, including being available in an audio format to allow for easy differentiation. Take a moment to turn to tab 5 in the Right Time for Kids Best Practices Guide. This section provides helpful strategies about embedding close reading in your classroom. We've established how you can use mentor text to improve reading skills by encouraging multiple close readings of the text. But how can mentor text improve writing skills? Well, mentor text provides students with models of good writing. Teachers know that modeling is an important part of the learning process, from modeling how to wash your hands to modeling how to work a math equation. Utilizing mentor text allows students the opportunity to see great models of authentic writing for real audiences. And it gives them multiple exposures to a new skill so that they can soon apply it to their own writing. In fact, the 2007 Writing Next report listed 11 recommendations for improving writing instruction. The study of models is one of those recommendations. According to the report, the study of models allows for students to have the opportunities to read, analyze, and emulate models of good writing. And this idea is central to the design of Right Time for Kids. Teaching one mentor text can help improve both reading and writing skills, but it can also be used to help a teacher incorporate grammar and language instruction. Reports by the National Councils of Teachers of English and the Writing Next panel echo over 50 years of research that say teaching isolated grammar instruction can actually have negative effects on students' writing skills. So what's a well-meaning teacher to do to teach grammar, revision, and editing as part of the process? Well, this takes us back to the mentor text for a third time. Grammar and language lessons are best taught in a meaningful context and applied immediately to students' own writing. The Writing Next panel says that teaching students to focus on the function and practical application of grammar within the context of writing versus teaching that grammar as an independent activity produce strong and positive effects on student writing. And Right Time for Kids makes that work easy. It targets specific languages for each lesson in both the mentor text and an application for the student writing. For teachers, this means one mentor text card can be used for reading, writing, and language skill development all at the same time. We've now come to our second stop and do. We've spent some time discussing the importance of mentor text in our teaching. So what's sticking with you? In your own words, write your answer to this question. Why are mentor texts important? Pause the webinar here and complete this stop and do section of your note-taking guide. Return to the video when you're ready. Welcome back. We've already mentioned that there are 4 teacher's guides that accompany the Right Time for Kids kits. Let's take a deeper dive into these resources and the lesson formats. These 8-page lessons will follow the same format, regardless of the genre or the grade level. As a teacher, it was comforting for me to know that no matter what I was teaching from one year to the next, I knew how to utilize those materials. Let's dive right into a sample from our level 3 of the series. Feel free to grab a copy of your teacher's guide to follow along. The first page of any lesson will give you a quick overview of the course skills. You'll see succinct lesson objectives, a lesson overview, and the student product. This section will tell you what kind of work the student will produce. The lesson's essential question, the writing, reading, and language and speaking and listening standards. Specific standards can be correlated by state and found on our TCM website. And finally, any materials that are needed for this lesson, including the student handbook pages that it refers to. The second page of the lesson is analyzing mentor text. This section will include multiple readings of the text, like we've talked about, to analyze the author's purpose and craft. It'll also set the foundation for that model of writing that students are to produce, as well as to be a topic for students to consider. On this page, you'll see that the lesson starts by establishing a purpose for the first reading. In subsequent reading, students look for additional skills and techniques. The teacher talk section, which you'll see here with large quotation marks, gives teachers ideas for how to do think alouds within the lesson. These think alouds help students develop their metacognitive thinking skills, in addition to modeling what good readers and writers do. Look for those large quotation marks to indicate a teacher talk section. Potentially challenging vocabulary is highlighted, and that can be pre-taught or covered in the context of your reading. Students also have these words printed on the back of their mentor text card for easy use. You'll also see reading extensions that incorporate collaborative speaking and listening skills. These Think Like a Reader sections prompt students to dig deeper into the text and examine author's craft. They're also great extension activities for students who need an extra challenge. Page 3 of the lesson plan is a full teacher annotation. This makes easy work of preparation for you. Each reading of the mentor text reveals new insights and models for students to help not only those reading comprehension skills, but also to highlight the skills they will use for their writing and language conventions. And since there are so many things you could discuss with a single piece of text, it would simply be too many things to put in this teacher's edition. You can find additional digital annotations divided by focus on our digital platform. Here you can select to focus on the reading skills, like we have here, or the writing skills, or even just the language skills for discussion. Page 4 is the language practice of the lesson. The language and convention mini lessons provide teachers a short, focused language skill that they would already need for this kind of writing task. Students have a copy of the mini lesson in their student handbooks. It can be used for reference as they move throughout the year. Students can further practice using that language skill with activities in the student handbooks. It will allow teachers the opportunity to check for mastery and any reteaching opportunities that might be needed before students would have to apply this to their own writing. In many cases, the actual words and phrases and sentences from the mentor text are used as the examples of the language skill, so students can see how this impacts real writers. Pages 5 and 6 of the lesson plan focus on the writing process. Let's pause here for a second to review that term. Based on the work of Donald Graves in the 1970s, the writing process focuses on process to create writing over the product. It follows a recursive 5 steps: pre-writing, drafting, revision, editing, and publication. The word recursive is important, as it suggests that students may move back and forth between these phases based on the topic at hand. For instance, a student may find that in the revision step that they need to return to pre-writing to add more detail to a paragraph that just isn't working. The writing process is never linear. Take a moment to tab pages 10 through 15 of your Best Practices Guide. Here, you can read more about the writing process. In this section, you'll also find helpful, student-friendly anchor charts to use with your students. Printable versions of the anchor charts are available on your digital resources as well. Let's take a look at pages 5 and 6 of the lesson plan in the teacher's guide and see how this 5-step process is followed. As with the writing process, students begin with brainstorming and pre-writing. They move into planning with graphic organizers tailored to fit the specific writing task. And then they draft writing in a similar model to the writing task. In this case, they're using a yes-no format, just like the article that they read. For a teacher, one of the hardest parts about Writer's Workshop was how to provide instruction to all levels of writers. Well, this lesson, as with all of them, come with specific differentiation options for students who are struggling and also for those that are excelling. Speaking and listening skills are embedded with collaborative writing ideas as part of this writing process. Graphic organizers are specific to the writing task and skill focus in this series. The student handbook includes a full color graphic organizer, but available on the technology platform, teachers can differentiate and scaffold for learner readiness by selecting the appropriate graphic organizer for students. This is the base graphic organizer, designed specifically for the task in the handbook. In this case, we're focusing on transitional or linking words and phrases between ideas and paragraphs. In the technology platform, you can find graphic organizers for students who may struggle and for students who need extensions. All the graphic organizers prepare students for the writing task and connect to the same lesson skills, but the leveled graphic organizers allow teachers to differentiate discreetly. Page 6 of the lesson takes students into revision and editing, including peer feedback and conferencing. The lesson concludes with ideas for publishing as well. Additional publishing ideas using the Time for Kids magazine template can be found as part of our digital resources. You may have noticed that the lesson suggests conducting writing conferences with students and building in time for peer feedback. Take a moment to tap the Best Practices Guide in pages 33 through 35. This is where you can find more information about peer and teacher feedback conferences. This section also includes templates for you to use with your students. Page 7 includes a writing rubric to share with students as part of this process. The rubric is aligned to the skills taught in the lesson, as well as building on the skills of previous lessons. The skills in the genre culminate in the 8th lesson, where students will be asked to apply all that they've learned before. The final rubric of the set reflects that gradual progression of skills that students have used and practiced throughout the previous 7 pieces of writing. The final page of the lesson plan includes lesson extensions to use for reading and writing, and a reminder of a new cold writing prompt available in editable Word format on the Digital Resources Jump Drive. The lesson also includes ways for students to continue their learning at home. We've just covered the 8 pages that comprise a lesson plan in the Teacher's Guide. It's time for our next stop and do. Choose any lesson in the Teacher's Guide. What skills do you see? Think about the explicit objectives as well as those skills that are being reviewed or that are implied. Pause the webinar here to complete this stop and do section in your note-taking guide. Return to the video when you're ready. Welcome back. Each lesson in the Right Time for Kids series creates a cohesive line from reading to language to writing, where students develop skills strategically and in layers. Let's look at how all of the parts of this example lesson fit together. This is a sample from Level 3, Lesson 4, the Opinion and Argument series. In this lesson, the lesson objective is to have students create paragraphs that link opinions and reasons together. Notice how the standards for writing and reading in language all focus on creating connections between ideas in writing. Even the essential question focuses on the skills of connection. The teacher annotations of the text highlight the author's use of linking words. The language practice gives students specific practice in the skills of using conjunctions. The graphic organizer, located in the student handbook and also in the technology platform, is designed to focus and highlight linking ideas together. And finally, you'll see in the student rubric the fact that linking skills is a skill that they need to master to be successful. All components of Lesson 4 are cohesive. They are centered around a single writing skill, in this case, linking ideas together. Students will identify that skill in reading in the mentor text, practice that skill with language application, and employ that skill in their own writing through the drafting and revision stages. Our next stop and do is for you to take a lesson to preview. We want you to trace a skill and how it's focused throughout the entire lesson. Choose another lesson in the Teacher's Guide, something new, you haven't seen it before. We're going to find out how that focused skill is integrated throughout all parts of that lesson. Using a highlighter, mark where you see the skill connection in the lesson, starting from the lesson objective, moving to the essential question, the lesson standards, the mentor text analysis, language practice, writing practice, and the final rubric. Pause the webinar here to complete this stop and do section in your note-taking guide. Return to the video when you're ready. Welcome back. Hopefully you've taken the opportunity to trace a skill throughout a lesson to see how it's built cohesively. Before we leave the Teacher's Guides, I want to point out 3 additional features that can aid you in your instruction. In addition to the 8 lessons, each teacher's guide includes a brief introduction to the genre itself. It also includes topic lists and a student exemplar sample. The exemplar works like an additional mentor text for students to read and to analyze. It's an example of a top-scoring essay according to the rubric for that final culminating 8th assignment. Now remember, the students have a handbook. Moving to this resource, you can find full-color copies of many of the components of the lessons. Each lesson has 6 pages for the students to practice, and it keeps you from standing in line at the copy machine because the student handbooks have it ready to go. Inside, you'll find copies of the mentor text for students to write on and annotate and return back to for reference. The language mini lesson, language practice activities, the base graphic organizer designed specifically for that particular writing task and skill, additional scaffolding in the form of sentence frames for struggling writers who might need a little help step by step through drafting. And finally, a place to make that final draft publication ready, including a checklist of reminders of the items in the rubric. Not only does the student handbook become a writer's notebook for your students to show growth and progress on skills they've learned throughout the year, they can also return to previous mentor text and mini lessons for references as they write. And if you need extra copies, don't worry. They're all available for you to print on the digital resources. We've come to the next stop and do, and we're moving on to the last resource, the Digital Resources Jump Drive. Throughout today's webinar, we mentioned several of the features of our digital platform. Which ones can you remember? Pause the webinar here to complete this stop and do section of your note-taking guide. Return to the video when you are ready. Well, we highlighted more than 5 things that you can find on the digital resources, but check your list to see what you may have missed. The Right Time for Kids digital platform includes the following features. Number 1, printable versions of the student pages. This makes teachers' lives a lot easier. Number 2, leveled graphic organizers. Remember, you can find the base graphic organizer as part of every student's handbook. If you would like to differentiate this stage of the writing process, this is where you would find that material. Number 3, interactive mentor text. This allows teachers to project onto interactive whiteboards the mentor text. Number 4, layered annotations. Here you can target just the reading skills, or just the writing skills, or just focus on the language skills that a writer is using. Number 5, interactive writing templates. Here students can practice writing for real, authentic audiences and formats. Number 6, voice recording features. This allows students to record themselves reading their pieces so teachers can listen for fluency and students can practice hearing their words out loud. And number 7, audio recordings of the text cards. This is a great feature for teachers for flexible teaching in the classroom. You can use this as part of centers, or you can use this for students who need a little extra help. You can also use this as a way to give your voice a rest. And remember, if you're at a loss at how to integrate technology into the Right Time for Kids series, just look for this icon in the teacher's guide. It'll give you ideas for integrating the digital platform within all of your lessons. We've come to our 6th and final stop and do. Throughout today's webinar, we looked at many of the features of the Right Time for Kids kits. What 3 features are you most excited about? Pause the webinar here to reflect and complete this stop and do section in your note-taking guide. Return to the video when you're ready. As we wrap up our Right Time for Kids introductory webinar, let's recap what we were able to accomplish. Number 1, we investigated the components of the Right Time for Kids kits. Number 2, we discovered how mentor text integrate instruction in reading, writing, and language skills. And number 3, we traced a cohesive learning goal throughout a lesson. As a teacher, we know your time is valuable. We appreciate you spending some of that time with us today and hope this training will help you be successful in implementing Right Time for Kids to help develop young readers and writers in your classroom and helping you to create a world in which children love to learn. Thank you so much.